communications earlier today. The e-blast that goes out from the office or whatever automated system that's used indicated that the land use meeting was happening at 11 a.m. And I was at an event around noon, and someone I know came up to me and said, "Did I miss the meeting?" And I said, "No, it's tonight." But now I understand why she said that.
Yeah.
So it was resent. But in any event, it is 7:02. We do have quorum. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. And as others join us, they can just jump into the conversation. So the first item on the agenda, which I think we already started to do briefly, is to introduce the new borough planner from the Department of City Planning, who's going to be working with community boards 9 and 12. And since we're 12, we're more interested in that. So Audrey, why don't you, well, first of all, let me introduce myself, and the committee members can introduce themselves, then you can take the floor and let others know who you are. So I'm Wayne Benjamin. I chair land use for Community Board 12. And moving on, I'm just going to call people as I see them on my screen. So Vivian.
Hi, I'm Vivian Ducat, and I live in Southern Washington Heights, and I'm the public member, the public member of the committee.
Thank you. Tanya. Tanya, you're muted.
Hi, I'm Tanya, community board member, also live in Washington Heights.
Anthony.
Hi there, my name's Anthony Viola, community board member in Washington Heights. I serve on this committee and the licensing committee.
Jim.
Welcome, Andrea. I'm on this committee, and I'm also on the Traffic and Transportation Committee, and I am the board parliamentarian. Imagine that.
And Daniel.
Hey, what's up? My name is Daniel. I also am in the Parks and Cultural Affairs, and I'm an artist living in the Washington Heights Inwood area.
Okay, so that's who we are. Audrey, why don't you tell us who you are?
Thank you for the introduction, Wayne, and it's very nice to meet everyone. My name is Audrey Walks. I recently joined the Manhattan Borough Office as Borough Planner for Community Boards 9 and 12. Prior to joining DCP, I worked as a journalist in New York City for 8 years, covering mostly architecture, design, urban planning, climate, sustainability. And I, a few years ago, returned to grad school to get a master in regional planning. And so I'm just finishing that up. And Olivia and Jose have told me a lot about you and all of the amazing work that you're doing. And so I'm really looking forward to being of assistance in any way that I can.
Okay, and we met briefly in a prior Zoom meeting, and subsequent, to that, I forwarded some information to you for reference. But I also mentioned that there were a number of resolutions that the community board passed pertaining to contextual zoning and rezoning. And I think Jose also mentioned that he had them and was going to share them with you. So have you been able to review any of the materials that have come out of CB12, the planning study that we worked on with City College back in 2008, I guess it was?
Absolutely. I reviewed the information that you sent me, and I also met with Olivia and Jose, who filled me in. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah.
So I wonder if members of the committee have any questions for Audrey, or particular points they would like to bring to her attention for future discussion.
What exactly were you writing about when you were like in art and doing journalism?
Sure. So I was, for a while, was an editor of a newspaper. like a small newspaper called the Architect's Newspaper, which is exactly what it sounds like. But they covered, very straightforward architecture, and then also, more urban scale or city scale things. So yeah, I've transitioned out of journalism, but recently I've written about like casinos for Curbed and about Hudson Yards. And I've also written about other design things, about paints and about cool lawn chairs and things like that. So it really runs the gamut from serious and technical to sort of fun and light.
I see James' hand. Jim, yes?
I just wanted to, re-welcome Andrea and the thing.
Andrea or Audrey?
Sorry, Audrey, right. I have the name Andrea on my mind, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I think, I'm biased. I was born and bred in this neighborhood and didn't get very far, but, or maybe I did, but you will find this an astoundingly interesting area because of the huge amount of parkland and the fascinating topography. They want to build an apartment house at the bottom of essentially a cliff. And so from one side of it, the lower part of the cliff, it will be like a 10, 12-story high building. And on the other side, it'll only look like 6 stories. And then the other thing, by the way, and I may even wave pictures at everyone, that building over the former Packard showroom is growing and growing, and it is indeed becoming the very eyesore that we thought it would be. It just towers over everything. It's just disgusting. In fact, I think we should unofficially name that building the eyesore or the sore thumb or something. And it totally ruins the view from the park. It's just vile. Someone should have bought the land and made a park there. Too bad we don't live in a rich neighborhood. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Audrey.
Vivian?
I was just going to say that you're joining us in a moment in which suddenly we're seeing, we may have known they were coming, but now we're seeing these enormous buildings being built in our midst. And this having been a largely 6-story environment, it's really a shock to us all. I think we enjoyed being off the map, and now we're on the map, at least for developers, and it's a very odd feeling.
Any other questions or comments for Audrey? I see that we're also joined by Jose from City Planning. If there is nothing from, my committee members, I will point out that Audrey will be joining us again at the June meeting to discuss the, what is that called? The City of Yes zoning text amendment, which I guess has now been finalized and it's being circulated for review. And my committee members will remember that we discussed this initiative, some months ago, at least the initial concept, and raised a few questions and concerns. And I also did share the minutes of that meeting with Audrey, so she has some background on the questions that we raised. We also were just joined by Steve Simon. Steve, Audrey is the new borough planner from City Planning who will be working with CB12. Would you like to introduce yourself, and then if you have any questions for Audrey?
Welcome, Audrey. I hope you've signed on for at least 10 years. There's no, I'm sorry. I think it's a 7-year period of indentured servitude. So I hope you understand those are the terms of the employment, and that you'll be with us for at least 7 years. So we're looking forward to working with you.
Likewise. Nice to meet you, Steve.
All right. Take care.
All right. So if there's nothing further for our new borough planner, Audrey, I'm going to move to the next item on the agenda, which is the proposal by the Landmarks Preservation Commission to designate 935 St. Nicholas Avenue an individual landmark. And I'm going to try to share my screen, so give me a moment.
You're all set to do that and all your panelists, and I'm about to give you the remote right now. So you're definitely going to be able to control the screen, even though you can do it now. I
Okay.
won't have any functionality once I give it to you.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay, so I circulated this notice to the committee, and it's available online. So this is the communication from city planning, where at their April 4th meeting, there was a proposal to calendar 935 for consideration, and it was. So at a subsequent LPC hearing, the actual designation will be considered, and between the time it was calendared until that public hearing, there is testimony that can be submitted. I believe even after the public hearing at which the designation is considered, the record stays open for a number of days, but we have ample notice. The date of the public hearing has not yet been set, so I thought it made sense for us to take a look at this proposal. And what's interesting is last month we looked at the 101 Cooper Street, the request for evaluation. We passed a resolution. The community board in a total passed it, so that went to LPC. At this month, we are talking about 935. Also in June, representatives of the Historic District Council will be meeting with us, and we're going to be talking about ways that they can work with us to help advocate for some of the preservation and designation priorities that we've been talking about for years. What is interesting is that the commissioners don't necessarily know all of the requests that come into LPC. There's a lot of stuff that comes in at the staff level and is not shared with the commissioners. For example, the former colored school number 4. There was an RFE that was put in for that by Eric, and I think in 2018. And in speaking to him, he happened to run into one or more of the commissioners more currently, and they were surprised to know that this RFE was submitted to Landmarks several years ago, and that staff had not engaged on it, because it seems that they are in fact interested in it, its history and its designation, but it came into the staff. I guess it was acknowledged, and that was the beginning and the end of that. So we have CB12, and I think Matthew Spady is on the meeting as well. He's experienced things where there are things submitted to LPC at the staff level. They very quickly reject it. We have no way of knowing if the commissioners have any knowledge of that. So we're going to talk about, what can be done. This is an interesting building in that it's not being proposed for designation specifically because of its architecture, although it's pointed out that it's a good and very still intact example of sort of late Gothic revival architecture for apartment buildings. But it's also, and more importantly, being proposed because of its association with Duke Ellington and Noble Sicily. And this building is actually referred to as the Duke Ellington building. And interestingly, it has been on the National Register of Historic Places since 1976. Why it has taken LPC this long to consider it for designation, I don't know, but it's been, on the National Register since 1976. I'm going to stop sharing this because you all have it, and I'm going to share another document that I put together, which are some images that I got from, the internet. So this is a close-up of, the above the entrance of the building. You can see, this wonderful intact detail. It reminds me to some extent of the Gothic quad at City College, of some of those buildings. And this is another shot of, the entrance to the building. This is similar to the photograph that LPC used. So these are maybe older photographs. This is a more contemporary photograph of the building. Here again, we get a sense of, the architecture and the scale. I don't know if the fire escapes are original. That's something I did not research. And once again, this is the corner of 157th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue, not far actually from, where I live. And these are some historic photos, and this is the point. These are from the National Register, and so these are older black and white photos, but you can see, looking at the cars, that there has not been, any material change made to the building over the decades. And that's one of the things that is cited, is that, the architectural integrity is, solid. It's intact. And you can see that also in this older photograph of the entrance to the building, and another photograph from the State Historic Preservation archives of, the building architecture. So it, to me, it's something that I welcome, LPC getting around to it. I recall when we were considering the heritage markers last year, some of the committee members, actually some of the board members, mentioned they had no idea that, Paul Robeson and various other people actually lived in our community. And, depending upon, the age of, some of the residents, they also may have, no knowledge of that. So, to not only recognize this building because of its architecture, but to recognize it because of, someone as noted nationally and internationally as Duke Ellington. And, I was speaking to my youngest brother. He, of course, knew Ellington. He did not know Noble Sissel. And, Noble Sissel and U.B. Blake bringing, one of the first hit Broadway musicals to Broadway that was written by and featured, Black people, is something, worth remembering. But I open the floor or the screen to, comments from, my land use committee members on this proposed designation.
I think it's definitely absolutely needed. I will note, and I know obviously private companies have no bearing here, but both Google Maps and Apple Maps list it as a landmark already, which I found to be fascinating. I don't know what their process.
They're probably doing it based upon the National Register listing. It is a National Register landmark. It is not a New York City landmark.
Right. Yeah, just interesting to me,
Yeah.
but certainly in support.
I see Jim Berlin's hand.
Well, I think both because of the extraordinary history, sorry, of the residents of the building, and also, as you saw in the chat, the building is absolutely gorgeous. And
I guess I missed it in the chat.
It's probably terracotta, and I'm so glad that it's in the condition it is. So I'm totally in favor of this.
Daniel.
I found the presentation to be super interesting, and the whole story behind the building. And just like looking at the old pictures and the new pictures, I wonder when they changed most of those windows, because it looks like some of the windows were like, I don't know how you call them, but they like flapped out.
Casement.
And those windows seem like they were replaced with these modern windows. And I wonder if they replaced all the windows all at once. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think what is interesting, and let me see if I can pull that up. Yeah, because it currently has the double hung windows, and in the older photo, I guess these photos must be from the
Like the top
70s.
rows and the middle rows, you can see that they have those
Yeah.
kinds of windows.
Yeah, the upper in the photos from the state register, the upper windows still were casement, although some of them were double hung. So, but I don't have the information on when that was done. But the interesting thing is, the change in the window does not, adversely impact otherwise the architectural integrity. However, if a window replacement project is proposed in the future, one of the things that landmarks will do is to look at the original photos and to advocate for the replacement windows to be similar to the original windows. Because we're going through that now in my building, which is not an individual landmark, it's in a historic district. And, the original windows were double hung, but they were double hung with, as it's like, the 4/1 or 6/1. And what we have are just plain old double hung windows. So in looking at the proposed project to replace windows in my building, landmark said, okay, but here's a old photo of what the windows used to look like in 1910 and try to match that. James, is that an old hand? I think Steve is next.
Yes, thank you. I have two questions. Number one, did we post in that building a notice about tonight's meeting to let the tenants know that this was under consideration?
I don't know what we posted. It is on our website. It was circulated, and actually the public hearing for landmarks is not yet scheduled. So that's the point at which testimony from the public will actually be solicited. We're not in charge of that.
Yeah, well, I would, I think it would be a good idea, not that anyone would be opposed to this, but I think it would be a good idea to make sure that the tenants of the building are aware of what's happening.
Before you move on to that, I would think that, they and others should be familiar with it, because when this and two other buildings, I think the other two buildings are in Harlem, were being considered, there were multiple articles in the press that highlighted the fact that these buildings that are kind of linked to the city's jazz heritage and African-American heritage were being considered. And I think one or more of my committee members forwarded those articles to me, although I've already seen them. So,
Well, again, I don't necessarily know whether people who live there are aware, but in terms of the resolution, and I would like to move that the resolution be adopted. I just want to make sure that I understand in the whereas that begins on the bottom of the first page and ends on the second page. Are we saying that the Prince of Wales was the guest drummer at a London concert?
yes.
Was that Prince Philip?
Well, the Prince of Wales at the time that Little Sissel was playing, yes.
Yeah, 1953, or played it and once before. Oh no, well, that's not clear when this happened. All right. Well, I would like to move that we adopt the resolution. I have several maybe minor edits that I can forward to you afterwards.
Yeah, well, and as I pointed out, the reason why assuming that this is something that the board or the committee might be interested in, the reason I drafted a resolution is because, tomorrow I'm getting on a plane and I will therefore not have time to do it later in the week or next week. So
well, I commend you for doing this beforehand. I mean, I think this is something, if we could possibly do it more often, it's great to have the resolution actually in hand.
Well, if we could stop for a second, because we don't always know how we are going to vote
Well,
on something, in advance. I think for this, given the positions that the committee and the board has taken, my assumption is we want to support it, but don't make work for me, Steve.
well, you're gonna do the work either before or after the meeting, so. But
Next,
again, I move that we adopt the resolution.
I second.
Vivian, you had your hand up?
I was
But-
just going to say that given all the decorative detail, which I imagine some of it is terracotta, it's also important. You don't think so? You think it's stone and not terracotta?
I don't know. I mean,
It's just because, now there's that law that came out of the Tishman woman having been hit in the head by terracotta. I'm sure that the landlord is going to plead poverty when it's time that you have to.
well, but let's think about that for a second, because sometimes I think we're too negative.
Oh.
It is 2023. And one of the things that Landmarks is telling us is if you look at the building, which was built in, 19, whatever, it retains a high degree of its architectural integrity. It was listed with National Register in 1976. There have been no significant changes to the facade, and Local Law 11 has been around a long time. It's not a new law.
But isn't there I was told by the board in my building that there's another law specifically that if a terracotta has been repaired once, the next time if you're landmarked, you have to replicate it in stone or some other material.
I don't know if that's true. There was a proposal years ago that would have required all terracotta to be replaced, regardless of the condition. That did not pass. On the other hand, if you're looking out of your window at my building, Vivian, some of the terracotta was replaced over the years with cast stone, and some was replaced with fiber reinforced stuff. And the point is, you can't tell the difference.
No, but it costs. This is a new thing that came out during the pandemic or was caused by a death that happened during the
No,
pandemic.
I know. I mean, my physical therapist is in the building where it happened.
All right.
But the point is, that's Local Law 11, which has been around for decades.
Well, whatever. I don't even know who owns it, but I think it's in good time given all the development activity that's going on. I wouldn't want anything to happen to that building.
Steve, is that an old hand or a new hand?
Old one.
Okay, you can take it down. Jim, is that an old hand or a new hand? Jim?
New hand. I want to sort of second that. I believe what you were saying about the facade of the building. Because of its beauty, let's just call it that, because I find it really beautiful. It should be landmarked and preserved. And, if a terracotta piece, fails or cracks or something, it might even be less expensive to replace it with, the artificial stone, as I like to call it. It's probably really concrete, or, fiberglass. They're probably not only less expensive and more, they're both less expensive and more durable. So I think we should, agree that, and then, I don't know whether such a charity exists, maybe it should, but if you have a landmark building and you really can't afford the work, this is the sort of thing that some organizations should be out there to subsidize, because there are magnificent buildings that are actually owned by very poor people, and they would love to keep them up, but they can't. And so if there were such a thing, well, Wayne, I believe you should start one. Then they could get some help.
Right. I would point out that it is possible to replace terracotta with terracotta. That's done on a number of buildings. PS 109 in East Harlem, a former public school that's now a combination of cultural art space and affordable housing. All of the terracotta on that affordable housing, not luxury housing project, was replaced with terracotta. And so, you know, but my point is, let's not assume that, you know, somehow half a century later, the property owner, which has taken pretty decent care of the building, is going to suddenly, you know, not take care of it. I see Daniel, and I also see we have a participant with a hand up as well.
Just quick point of information. I kind of scrubbed through the landmark video. It's brick, limestone, and terracotta.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
I see Ewan Chin. Ewan, you should be able to speak now. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's not really, it's a question. I'm just trying to get clarification on two things. Designating the building as a culture for its cultural significance. What I'm hearing is that because it's a cultural designation, that the architecture, the physical structure may not be protected?
No, that's it. They're not saying it's being designated as cultural. They're saying it is significant architecturally and culturally.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in the very last paragraph, you know, they point out, they says 935 St. Nicholas Ave is architecturally and culturally significant as a reflection of Harlem's history in the 20th century. So it's saying that it is both.
Okay, that's great, because the conversation confused me a little bit.
No, what I was pointing out is, and you know, UN Community Board 12 has, you know, passed a couple of resolutions asking LPC to pay more attention to the full scope of the, I think the 1963 or 65 preservation law, which says designation can be based upon architectural, historical, and cultural, and LPC has not been really that focused, in from what I could see, on designating things because of their cultural or historic significance. It's like, if it's architecturally important, fine. If the architecture has changed, it doesn't matter if, you know, the Magna Carta was written there, we're not interested. So in this building, and I think in an earlier email, one of my committee members pointed out, this should be a no-brainer for LPC because architecturally, it's significant. It's a very intact example of, you know, early 20th century Gothic revival apartment house architecture, and culturally, you know, you've got Ellington and Noble Sissel, and it's already been recognized close to half a century ago for its significance with Duke Ellington by the you know, the National Register. So it's both.
Yeah, I think it's partly a PR thing on the LPC's part, you know, to say that here they are independently designating these sites associated, you know, significant African American sites. The one thing that bothers me and is that we've got some RFEs, a couple of RFEs at LPC, and I'm wondering if they're doing this independently. If that's going to be used as an argument to say, well, UN, you know, we've just designated 3 or 4 sites in, you know, individual sites in Harlem, we have to move elsewhere. That's the only thing that concerns me. But I do think the designation of this building should be, you know, fully supported, whatever their reasoning might be.
Yeah, Ewan, why don't you, I know you, I know some of my committee members, but why don't you introduce yourself to the committee and let them know sort of who you are and what you're involved with.
Okay, so my name is Ewan Chin, and I am a volunteer executive director for the West Harlem Community Preservation Organization. I also run Harlem One Stop, which is a cultural portal. But the work we've done in West Harlem since I guess it's the mid-90s, have been focused on landmark designation, local landmark designation of the extension of the Hamilton Heights district, as well as the creation of the Sugar Hill district. And it's a non-contiguous district. And more recently, the Durrance Brooks Historic District, which was named for the, it's the first historic district named for an African-American
Yes.
who
And
fought
actually,
in World War
CB12
II.
passed the resolution supporting that, even though it's
Mhm.
not in Washington Heights Inwood, noting the importance of the fact that this is the first time in decades since the LPC was created that a historic district was named for an African American.
Yes, and we've just, what we've tried to do over the years is to also get the state historic district and listings on the National Register for all the historic districts. We're a little short on a few blocks, but we're now working to sync both designation, his local as well as state designation on the Hamilton Heights and the Sugar Hill district. Last December, we succeeded in getting almost 500 buildings in a new West Harlem State Historic District from 135 to 155th. And we're now following up on an RFP, which was submitted to LPC 2 years ago, to at least have a community conversation about what sections of West Harlem would be eligible for New York City landmark designation.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that, you. And I thought it was important for, the folks at the meeting to know who you are and what you're involved with. And just, for reference, I did ask LPC, sort of the rationale for the designation. Was it based upon someone submitting an RFE, or did they, do it on their own? And the response was that, LPC is, has undertaken a survey to identify sites in Harlem and citywide that are, of importance to the African-American community, African-American history. And so the 3 buildings, I guess, were a part of that survey. They did not say that was the limit of the survey, but the extent to which there were RFEs submitted that have buildings that, fall under, that category of they are of importance and significance to the African American community and history. I would remind them of that and say that their survey should, include and act upon those RFEs.
Right, I agree. And I will certainly use that in my follow-up to them next week. Before I shut up, I wanted to note that on June 10th, we're having our second historic preservation conference at City College. The panels are being set up now. So when we have further information, I will forward the proposed panels to you, Wayne. But save the date. It's June 10th. It's a 1-day long historic preservation conference, and it deals with the built environment, cultural identity. There's one on the churches, 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. The churches were in dire need. So the discussion is to look back and then, talk about what's happening today and to plan forward.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I recall a few years ago, the preservation conference, someone coordinated with the New York chapter of the American Institute of Architects, and it was eligible for.
Yeah, this one will be too. Yeah, I forgot you were there. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I was there. Yeah.
Yes, we're seeking credits again this year. So it's June 10th at City College, Spitzer. School of Architecture.
Okay, sounds really
Thank,
interesting.
thank you. Oh, and by the way, City College replaced all their terracotta, not with terracotta, but with a fiberglass terracotta, because the real terracotta, they had to do it twice. The first time it failed, so they had to go back and replace it with fiberglass in some instances.
That was actually done by, I used to work at the Dormitory Authority, and the Dormitory Authority, did at least one, maybe both of those projects.
Mhm.
And one of the interesting things about the history is the terracotta started failing soon after the buildings were built.
Wow.
And part of the problem is the way the terracotta at the end of the day is just, it's, fired clay. And the anchorage, if the metal has any moisture exposed to it and it begins to rust, the movement, the expansion caused the clay basically to crack. And so that started happening very soon after the building, was built, which is one of the reasons why in some instances, terracotta is replaced with something other than terracotta. But the other thing is the lessons learned on how to properly, float and anchor the terracotta so that it's, basically the fired clay is not being subjected to movement that will cause it to crack.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
And thanks for giving me the time to explain our work.
No, thank you for joining us. So there is a motion on the floor to support the designation of 935 St. Nicholas Avenue as an individual landmark. It was moved by Steve. It was seconded by Osi. And, just to clarify, because I did not do this last month, we will first get the vote from the committee members. If there are any other board members present, they can then vote. And then members of the public, unlike in the general meeting where it's only for board members, members of the public can also vote, and that vote, is recognized in the count. So those committee members in favor, please raise your hand. And Aisha, how are you voting? Because I just see your face. Oh, there you are. Okay, stop popping it around. I've got 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Now for board members, I see we have Marielle Ali. Marielle, would you like to, those in favor?
Yes.
Okay, and any opposed or abstaining? There are no others. And members of the public. So Ewan, you're the only member of the public. Would you like to vote in favor?
Yes, 200% in
200%.
support.
Okay, I know Matthew Spady was here at the beginning of the meeting, but he's no longer with us. So that motion is carried. Any edits that you may have, committee members, on the resolution? I don't know what's happening because both Vivian and Daniel said that they could not, for some reason, track the changes. I will see what I can see if I can track in Vivian's, but it'll be ideal if we have one document that has the cumulative edits so that it's easier, to finalize, once I get back. So the next item on the agenda is the continuing discussion of the Housing Opportunities Plan that Mark Levine rolled out at his State of the Borough address in late January. And we are also joined by Marielle Ali from the Housing and Human Services Committee. And last month, we discussed, the interest in having land use and Housing and Human Services work together on this, because at the end of the day, we're looking at a project or an initiative that's intended to develop more housing. So in addition to the, the land use regulation, the planning concepts that we think are appropriate. It's also what kind of housing, do we need? Of course, we're talking about affordability, but also do we need senior housing? Do we need supportive housing? So rather than having, two committees working separately and then coming up with separate resolutions as we've done in the past, and sometimes we bring it together, the idea is to have the committees, sort of cross-fertilize. So, Mariella Lee is here with us, and, Marielle, I'll invite you to, join us and share your thoughts on, what Housing and Human Services is looking at and how you see, working with land use, and what are some of the key considerations that Housing and Human Services is discussing relative to this Housing Opportunities Plan.
Sure. Thank you, Wayne. And apologies, colleagues, for not being on camera. I'm kind of multitasking at the same time. Yeah, so I mean, I think, Wayne, you laid it out quite well. I think this is obviously an opportunity. There's a lot of overlap, and this is an opportunity for us to work together. I will admit, though, that on the Housing and Human Services side, we have our meeting tomorrow. But I did raise this with the committee during the April meeting, and we had a very, very brief discussion on it. But there was agreement that yes, we should work together. A lot of what we're looking at now is exactly that. What does affordability mean, and for who? And so we talked about doing some research in terms of the AMI, what type of affordable housing. I think that's obviously a very valid and a very important question that we should be asking. Some of the other things that we've been looking at, not in particular to kind of the building of new housing or affordable housing, but obviously still related in many instances. Now we've been focusing on a little bit more so lately has been the right to counsel, and kind of doing some work around there. What I will say, though, is that we are looking to have someone soon from HPD join us from the Housing Connect team. So, that's the platform that New Yorkers can access to for the housing lottery, to kind of talk a little bit more about it. And I think that would also help inform some of the discussion. But again, we really haven't delved in as much. And I invite you, Wayne, to join us tomorrow during our meeting to continue the conversation if you're able to join.
Yeah, I unfortunately won't be able to join you because I'll be sitting in the airport waiting for my plane to take off.
Okay.
But I do encourage other committee members to log in.
Yes, please do. Because I think it's an important conversation for us to have and things to think about moving forward. But yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Wayne, and the committee for the discussion, and I'll engage with all of you on this item.
Okay, and I circulated to the committee sort of 8 points that we've discussed this housing plan in our February, March, and April meetings. So there were just some points that came up. The most recent one, as I mentioned, was partnering with Housing and Human Services Committee. But the other 7, was like identify additional potential development sites. And as I've shared with everyone, what Marcus pointed out is like, unlike what you would typically expect, that you release a plan to, do something and there's a lot of pushback, it's been just the opposite. Folks have been saying throughout the city, well, what about this site? What about that site? So the Borough President's Office has created a portal, and I shared that, with the committee, where individuals can submit additional sites for consideration. So that's something that we've done internally with the Land Use Committee. We've, created a list, and, that's something that we can and should share with the Borough President's Office. We've talked about, the need for the plan to give attention to preserving neighborhood scale and character. And, part of that is contextual zoning, defining affordability so that it makes sense for local residents. That's one of the first things we talked about. Identify the types of housing development that's needed, the family size with senior supportive, et cetera. Last month, we talked about the need to review the appropriateness of some of the commercial zoning that's proposed and where it's proposed. I don't know if we discussed it so much, but clearly we need to identify what kind of infrastructure investments are needed to support this new residential, development. We always, sort of react when a project is proposed, like, is there enough sewer? Is there enough electricity, schools, subway? So if this is part of a plan that's coming out of city government, one of the things we should also point out is they need to identify the infrastructure investments and identify what is the game plan for doing that. And of course, the other thing that we talked about, and Housing and Human Services also talked about it, is having some kind of a forum where we can solicit, community and stakeholder input. So as I said, those are, off the top of my head, those are, I think, some of the key things that we and land use have discussed about, this initiative, since it was first rolled out. I see Anthony's hand.
Yeah, Wayne, were you able to have any success accessing, that portal? I went on the website that Porfirio sent you, and I didn't see any place for any person to be able to suggest a new zone. Or
I have not tried to access it, but I will share with Porfirio that I'll ask him, is there some issue, or how specifically does one navigate the site?
Okay, thank you.
Marielle, I see your hand again.
Yes, thanks, Wayne. So I was looking at the landing page on this earlier today, and it includes the Google form, Anthony, where any New York City resident can go ahead and kind of input that information. Now, if the form works is a different story. I don't know. I assume it does, but I did see it, and I'll drop the link in the chat for you. But just wanted to come back really quickly on your point, Wayne, in response to the fact that there has been a lot of support for this proposal that has come out from the MBPO and what we as CB12 can do, and as to kind of joint committees. I think we briefly discussed this and would love to see, how feasible this could be. But I wonder if there's something as almost like a walking tour that we could do, as maybe it's one day in Washington Heights and another time in Inwood, a Saturday or something, for like an hour and a half, and identifying where, as the community, and keeping it open to the public, inviting community-based organizations working on these issues in our area to walk around and raise awareness on it. I think that's where we as the community board have power and can help advocate and bring awareness to it. But also through that process, I help identify some of those sites and potential locations where this can happen. I think there's also a bit around, and I think this probably will fall a little bit more on the housing side, but certainly open to support from this committee as well, is again, coalescing and bringing together all of these community-based organizations that are working on these issues, seeing where they stand, having those conversations. Something that we're doing in tomorrow's meeting, we'll be talking about the Rent Guidelines Board meeting. Yesterday they met, and now they kind of put forward the proposed range for 1 year and 2 year kind of, rent stabilized apartments. And so obviously there was a lot of, at one point, I believe the figure 16% was being, floated around. Thankfully, that was not voted in terms of, or at least, within that, it's no longer possible, but that it's still a significant range considering, the economic environment that we all find ourselves in. So we're doing kind of a lot of bits and pieces, and they all obviously lead to this, but really looking forward to working with this committee on this initiative.
Yeah, actually, I did a little walking tour of my own to
Nice.
Identify. So actually, I did it, twice, and I'm reminded that I think it was last summer, because Gail Brewer was still borough president. There was a walking tour organized by the borough president's office of the Inwood area, of all the development sites in Inwood. I think, Tanya, weren't you at that walking tour with me?
Yes, I was.
Right. So, I mean, that was a good way of doing it because there was a map created and the sites were identified and there was a route that we took. Of course, they also included food, but that would be a interesting way because this is the entire, CB12. So we can't do it all in one day, but I think, having a series of walking tours hit different parts of the district would be a great way to say, look at this. It's a one-story building sitting on the corner. And by the way, the tenant just moved. So can't you see a apartment building here with ground floor retail? Or, what Anthony pointed out, last month that, if you look at this site, it would be okay to develop something here, but it would be absolutely inappropriate to do some kind of a big commercial development at that location. So, I mean, rather than looking at the map and saying, do you understand? I think, walking around and standing, in front of or next to the building or the site is a good way to do it and to get some steps in. Thoughts from the committee? Who are unusually silent?
I would totally be on board with a two-part walking tour. I like that idea a lot.
Maybe a multi-part?
Yeah.
I walked from like 155th up to the George Washington Bridge and back. I don't know if everyone would want to do that, but you could do sort of that section and then maybe another section up to Dykeman, then a section, up to there or maybe Ford, but that's,
Yeah, I've done some of the walking tours that have been led by the elected's office, different elected offices. I think that would be a good effort on behalf of the community board to do with the community, to engage with the community as well as address the topics at hand.
Yeah, and the weather we're going into the kind of weather where a walking tour is, a good activity. Daniel.
Just as a suggestion for the walking tour, it would be cool like to have a map and after whatever official walking tour, like publicize it and have other people like have the walking tour, then put points on where whatever discussion was made, just in case if someone can't make it on that day.
Yeah. Marielle?
Thanks, Wayne. I like Daniel's idea, and I wonder if building on that, there's scope, again, thinking about looping in the community and things like that, organizing these, 3 or 4 walks, let's say, with community partners, starting in a particular location by zones or however it is, it's defined using a map and so on, doing the walk. And then maybe afterwards, if there's a place, those that are on the walk, whether it's to stop at, an office or at the community center or with the nonprofit, to have a discussion on some of that. What did everyone see? What are some action points? So that way kind of people really feel involved that, yes, we're walking, we're getting our steps in and we're talking about this, but also, okay, what are the next steps and how do we keep the momentum? And then, like you said, I think perfect timing with the spring here. In terms of timing, I would possibly suggest, I don't know, July I feel like it's too hot. Unless you do it like in the morning, you know what I mean? Because I also want to be mindful, with weather and, who would be coming out, whether it's, our older neighbors, our younger neighbors. Maybe it's like, I don't know, June-ish into early July. But I also know that we also, as a community board, we take a break over the summer. So helpful. Yeah. It sounds like this may be an option. And I think coming out of this walking tour, it may actually help inform the workshop that we talked about in terms of inviting different community stakeholders. So that would be the electeds, MBPO, developers as well, to really making sure that this is kind of, all hands on deck and that we're, going to have a constructive dialogue about how we do this.
Yeah. And I was going to say that July is certainly probably better than August.
Yeah.
But we could also think about a series of like Saturdays in or whatever. But I think also that the walking tours are not official community board business. So we can do it in, July when the community board is otherwise, in hiatus, if we're basically using that to gather information and then to, feed back into a form or something that we're doing in September as official community board business.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Because actually, at that forum, one of the presentations that can be made is, what we saw, what we learned, what came out of these various walking tours. Other thoughts from committee? Actually, for Audrey and Jose, is there a resource person at city planning that could help with like preparing maps of the routes once we decide what that is, so that we can have good graphics to share with people?
Hi everyone, Jose here from the CP. Yeah, we can take a look into that. Can you remind me again, what is the timing for this? You said sometime in July?
Well, we haven't quite said it, so it may in fact be over the summer.
Okay, yeah, I definitely can look into that. I mean, also, we are very involved with this, the proposal from the Board of Presidents. So, we had also taken a look at the proposed size and kind of reviewing and providing some feedback. More conversations are still being developed. So, as you know, like some of the sizes the board just pointed out, they were already developed, they were already in transition, mostly in Harlem, East Harlem in general. Yeah. So we just cross-referencing that information. But I'll definitely flag this and talk to our urban design team. And, if not, we might do it ourselves. It might not be the prettiest map, but it will get you there.
Yeah, and
but
that's
yeah,
under Scott Stringer, we used to get sort of planning fellows. And so you could basically get a student or a planning fellow to, work on some maps, with you, but we haven't had planning fellows, in a while. So I'm, and quite frankly, the various, mapping and GIS software is not something that I'm really familiar with, and I have to start using it. But I see Aisha and I see Steve. So Aisha was first.
I just wanted to comment on having the walk be held over the summer. I would prefer that it not be, specifically because time-wise, it conflicts with other things. As for me specifically, I look to the summer as a moment to breathe, maybe spend a little bit more time with family, etc. But additionally, this board voted, previously when I was chair, I put forward a resolution that spoke to the fact that during the summer months, we are on hiatus, and work being done during the summer months, which really the intent of the resolution was to address other bodies of government that may engage us while we're on hiatus. So for instance, EULA process that may take place and the developer take advantage of the opportunity to, put things in play when they would land in our lap during the months when we're not generally working, is not the best idea. And so I feel like we should operate within that same spirit where other things are concerned. I've actually missed some things that have taken place during the summer specifically because of that, and it may affect other board members in that same way.
But that's the point I made earlier. These walking tours are not official, community board business. We thought this was a good way to visualize, the sites. And the reason we're talking potentially about the summer, because we're in the first week of May. Nothing has been planned yet. So it's entirely possible that I said we could pick like 3 Saturdays in June, which would still be while we're in session. But, folks got to, get together and plan it and get it done, because it's not all going to be coming from me.
Or early September.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, if one of the things we want to do is have some kind of a forum, as we discussed, where you bring together a lot of stakeholders, we want to be able to, have some things to share. And I also don't know what the borough president's schedule is for doing something with the plan. So I don't think we want to wait, 9 months or a year to give them, feedback. So it's a scheduling thing. We need to think about how to do it and who's going to step up to volunteer to do what.
And not to cut you guys off, but I mean, if we hear anything in terms of like part of the developments, we'll reach out to you guys, in preparation of this tour. I think it generally is definitely a great idea, especially for myself, and no recommending Audrey, but it would be good for us to also be participant on this and getting to know the neighborhood. I can see perhaps more people from our office wanting to participate too in a walking tour as we had done in Morningside Heights. So, for us, as long as we have enough lead time for prepare for this, we are game. I am. Sorry, Audrey, I don't want to put you in here, but definitely.
Okay, I see 3 hands. I see Steve, then Daniel, then Marielle. So Steve?
Yeah, 2 things. Number one, I think I would like the opportunity, not necessarily to have the walking tour, but to be able to sit down at a table with maps that show the various locations and how they their proximity to each other and the size of the sites, which maybe you could get a better sense of when you can see them all on a map. So I can see having some kind of a workshop in which we're all looking at maps and looking at the different sites and their and the layouts. But I would like from Jose and Audrey, I'd like to know what the feedback was from city planning about the sites recommended by the borough president's office for our community. Is that something you'd be able to provide at our next meeting?
I can tell you now. So I was out for about 2.5 weeks. Audrey and the other planner for community boards 10 and 11, Trevor, working in terms of cross-validating the sites that were put into the plan with what we already know is happening, because some of them weren't up to date. We are meeting, I believe, with City Hall and the department and the board of president next week. But essentially, it's just the data and saying like there is plans for this because we have something in Euler already and cross-validated it.
Well, I think that would be helpful information for us to have.
But Steve, are you talking about the plans that were identified by Mark Levine's office, or the additional sites that we identified subsequent to that?
Well, I'm assuming right now that the city planning is not looking at the ones that we might be adding to the list. But as a starting point, I would at least like to know what city planning's feedback was on the sites that are part of the borough president's plan.
I think we can come back with an answer and perhaps some materials by the next meeting.
Right.
I will have to check with our, director and deputy director in terms of how they're managing those conversations. I assume, this is going to be public information at the end, but I don't know how they're managing that conversation. But we can talk about that.
Well, if what you're providing is basically a status report on whether or not these different sites are somewhere in the development pipeline, or whether there's some kind of plan for them one way or another, that I assume is public information that you could furnish to us as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's what my thinking is. And I think maybe if we put it in a map or something in preparation for a walking tour will be, best used to visualize everything that we have. But I'll follow up with you. I personally haven't, I need to cross-reference those and double check the information that was provided as well.
Right.
So I don't have, I cannot tell you if we have like only 2 or 3 or a percentage of what was, checked. But if, as soon as I do that, I'm happy to come and provide more information.
And I would hope that when the board finally compiles its own list of possible sites, you'd be able to give us the same kind of feedback.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, thank you.
Daniel.
I might sound redundant, but I think that this whole walking tour, and if people can't be part of it, they should just publish a map prior and publish a map after. One example is New York Road Runners. Every time they do a race, they publish a map prior to the race so people can do the route. I run a lot, so when my run club is about to meet, they publish a map prior to it. So even if I don't run with them, I can just take that map and like run it by myself, you know? And then people can do it on their own time, you know, either on working hours or not working hours, either for like an hour or 30 minutes or like, oh, like, let me walk the route backwards and you could, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was like probably like the same thing that I said earlier. And New York Road Runners is a great example.
Yeah, but that's the reason why I was asking, you know, our friends at City Planning, what resources were available to help put together, you know, some good maps, because the walking tour that I mentioned, that the borough president, you know, there was a map that was emailed around, and there was a start time and there was start location, and a couple of people caught up with the group, you know, en route. So if we have, you know, 3 or 4 of these walking tours planned, and if on, you know, this Saturday, we're going to be walking from, you know, 155th to, you know, 170th or whatever, and here are the sites, and we're going to start here and, you know, do that. If we can post that e-blast, someone who can't start with us at 155th Street, that can join us on 163rd, you know, they know where we'll be. All right. Or they may not know precisely, you know, where we'll be at a given time, but they'll know the route we're taking. And if they can't do it on that day, they will at least know what we looked at. And as you said, they could do it on their own.
I have 2 suggestions. There's a program called Footpath that we use as runners, and just Google Maps. You can just have markers, and then after that, send the list of like, turn left, turn right, stop here, marker A, marker B. You know, those are 2 free resources.
And so Daniel just volunteered to do that.
Sure, I'll do it. Why not?
Marielle.
Thanks. I mean, Aisha makes a good point. I know throughout the year we do a lot, and rest is important. And so if we are confident that we can pull this off in the next 8 weeks, which is it's a big ask, considering we're all volunteers and we all have, you know, a million other things going on. And I say this as I try to clean my kitchen. So, you know, I think that's the thing. You know, just really making sure that if people can commit to, you know, all of us each, you know, taking ownership of a piece of this, then we can make it work. What I can say is, to Daniel's point, in regards to, you know, if colleagues can't make it, we can easily have something, for instance, hey, can't make it, and you know, kind of do the walk on your own. You know, make sure to send us an email about it, or, you know, here's the, you know, a Google form, add your thoughts, and we'll make sure to collate it. So I think that's an easy fix. So we still have a way for people to participate in the process if they're not able to make the actual date and, you know, time. But in terms of like taking a piece of it or ownership and next steps, I think there's a conversation that us as the Housing and Human Services Committee can have tomorrow. And Aisha is on the committee as well. We can lead that discussion tomorrow around having, you know, what community organizations should we invite. We can, you know, send, for instance, some proposals in terms of what the 4 or, you know, 3 or 4 zones should look like, and start from there. But I think we need to identify target dates. It sounds like probably, you know, towards the end of June, most likely, to give ourselves enough time, but also within the working window period. And then work back from there in terms of what needs to be done, and so on and so forth. And I think what would be really nice, to your point, Wayne, about always involving food does bring people out. So I wonder if, you know, there's an opportunity possibly, you know, after some of these things, again, there's a meeting space at a local coffee shop or restaurant. Maybe it's a way to get some of the business owners involved. You know, there's a lot of opportunities, but it does take a lot of work.
So that means we can also ask our friends at business development to help with that.
That's right. Share the work.
Share the love. Aisha.
So I love the way that this is all unfolding. I volunteer to help promote it on various social media platforms. We could include links to the map, for instance, and information about the sites that we may know beforehand, the Google form, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe along the route, different restaurants that are in proximity can participate by offering samples or something of that nature,
Yeah,
or some type of price fix or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's my point. We can ask the business
like
development committee to see, what they can do to help, with that. And also, the Isidro and the Washington Heights bid and Eleazar and the Chamber of Commerce, if there are restaurants, businesses that, want to host, the group when we are, after we've walked ourselves silly, we can also reach out to them.
Oh, and I was also going to say, versus just the date, like, of course, we have the dates that we're proposing to do the walk with us, but make it the entire range of maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month, where we are promoting that people should get out there and participate and do the walk and give us that feedback that we're looking for.
Yeah, well, my thought is it's only May 3rd. So I wouldn't wait until the end of June to do this, because if let's say we're going to do 3 walking things, I would think that we should be able to target, maybe 3 Saturdays starting in mid-June, and so that gives us a month to, we got to keep it simple, but it gives us a month to pull it together and advertise it.
And I just wanted to add, we will definitely double check about like if there is any further, movements on this. I mean, I definitely think we should definitely do the walking tour regardless, and get out there. But anticipating that there might be further development between now and perhaps 2 weeks from now. As you know, the plan came out in January. So it has been some time. The board president might be moving already in something that I'm not completely aware, but if I'll try to check with our leadership to provide some information, so to manage expectations.
Okay, Mariana.
Yes. So my point was going to be that I will, I'll take it upon myself, or I'll support by kind of pulling together all these different bits and pieces into a proposal, identifying who has volunteered for what, and mapping out a potential timeline for what this could look like. So that would be my contribution for this.
Okay, thank you. Daniel's at an old hand or a new hand?
New hand. I have a quick question. Is that list that the city has, is that like the final list? Because I would love to start mapping out just a route. Or is there like somewhere where I can see like just markers of like what's where?
Well, the plan that was released is, or includes the sites as they currently stand. It's not final because, as the borough president's office, said, and I think I shared, last month, it's not all inclusive. It wasn't intended to be all inclusive, and they're in fact open to, having community boards suggest additional sites. But we can certainly take the sites that are in the report that are in Washington Heights and Inwood and map those. Steve? Steve?
Yes, if we're going to do the walking tour, I hope it would include the additional sites that we have in mind to add to the list. We've already discussed a few of them. Personally, I'd like to take a look at 1 or 2 that Martin Collins suggested at one of our meetings. So I hope we're not going to limit ourselves to just the ones that are currently on the borough president's list.
Well, it would make sense to have a single map and to color code it so that we can show the sites that were proposed in the plan and then the sites that we've added.
Right. So then before we do the walking tour, we're going to have to maybe solidify our own list.
Well, I mean, we can solidify it as of that point in time.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
we can always add stuff later.
Yes, of
And
course.
I mean, I've recommended some sites, Daniel's recommended some sites. I mean, I have to go through my emails, just pull all of those together and said, these are the additional, sites. And as we're walking around, there may be something that wasn't identified and we can say, well, what about that? Or there might be something that we, put on the list and as we're walking, I said, no, that's a bad idea.
Wayne, sorry, if you have sites already, I think that's a good idea. That we can potentially already have a different color that says recommended or sites to visit. Could you send me that list so I can take a look at and also cross validate it with what we have proposing here?
I will have to pull that together because, as I said, it's a series of emails. So I can get that to you. I won't get it to you anytime soon.
It's fine. No worries.
Wayne?
Steve?
There's a site that I have in mind, and I'm not exactly sure where it is, but can you remember that several years ago, we had a discussion, I believe, about a parking lot on 163rd or 164th Street that Columbia was using close to Edgecombe Avenue, maybe between Amsterdam and Edgecombe, and we discussed giving them the right to extend their the use for a parking lot for a finite number of years, maybe 5-10 years, and we said after that period it should be developed for housing.
I remember we said that. I have no idea if that's what BSA said, and I doubt if they did. But yeah, I do remember.
All right, could we add that one to our list?
We can certainly add it.
Yeah, all right. You know which one I have in mind.
Yeah, that's the one you mentioned. I think you were still working with Stan Michaels.
Yes.
At the time when the use of it was originally negotiated.
Yeah, so it was meant to be used by the Rena Daycare Center. Actually, you just prodded my memory. Yes, it's behind the Rena Daycare Center building.
Yeah, I do remember that discussion.
Yeah.
Can we include pictures of the sites on the map beforehand so that people know what they're looking for?
We can do anything that folks are going to commit to help to do.
Yeah. I get around a lot lately, so I'll be willing to take pictures if we don't have good pictures of some of the sites so that we can include them. That way people know what to look for.
Yeah. Daniel?
Send me all the sites and send me everything. I would love to do this map. I'm like so eager to do it.
Sounds good. I actually took some photos when I did the walking tour of, I did not go down the hill at 158th Street, but I'm going to volunteer Anthony to do that, to take a picture of that site. But I took a picture of, some of the sites on Broadway where the commercial zoning is, and I took pictures of some other buildings that are not in the plan, but I took pictures of them to give some context because often we talk about, oh no, you can't do a building that's that tall or whatever. I said, well, wait a minute, that building, which has been there since 1920, is actually taller than what's being proposed. So I just took some photos that I thought would be useful, so I will share those as well. Anything further on this, on the Borough President's Housing Opportunities Plan? Is there any old business?
Did we hear anything new on the Cumming Street building?
The last hearing was held, I believe it was on the 25th. The commissioners closed, the comment period. And I'm told that at their next meeting, they will make a decision. So at their next meeting, they're not taking any more comments. At their next meeting, they will announce their decision.
And that presumably would be this month?
I don't know when,
Oh.
because BSA, I don't think BSA has a regular schedule, but I'm assuming they would have probably 2 meetings this month. Aisha?
I just wanted to ask, so now I cannot unsee Art Deco everywhere I go. But I am very interested. And so I was wondering what agency or institution keeps history of buildings and information about the architecture. Like, where would someone go to get all those details?
That sort of depends. I mean, landmarks would have some of it if it's landmarked. I think, some of our libraries, I mean, Vivian, when you do research, Museum of the City of New York, Columbia University, not necessarily city agencies, maybe the municipal archives. Vivian, you're muted.
I was going to say that Avery Library at Columbia, if you could get in, is really, I mean, it's a great architecture library, and they have a lot of resources even online about how to research New York City history. I think that the borough that the municipal archives, the Ken Cobb, who runs it, is a very accessible person. He's I think he's either the word is deputy or assistant commissioner of records. Trying to think. I mean, you have to start to, if you get to know people like the New York Historical Society, I know the people in the reference room, and I always contact them about what's new in pictures, but I don't, you'd have to figure out if you wrote them first and see how they could help you in this, I think.
And didn't the Museum of the City of New York digitize a number of photos and books on architecture in the last couple of years?
Their photos are unbelievably expensive, though. I mean, the cheapo nonprofit rate is $150 if it hasn't gone up. So there's a ton of stuff online. They've just changed their software so it only comes out like this big. They're trying to really keep people from keeping those photographs. It's very annoying. They want the money, but I mean, they've digitized a lot. There's also, to think of what it's called, there's a consortium of archives in the state. It's called something like Metro. I could think of it and write it in. And that's really useful because lots of little libraries in various places with various interests are all merged in a digital environment.
So we have Ian Smith, who is a participant, put in chat that there's some good digitized architectural archives at both Columbia and the New York Public Library. Vivian did mention Columbia. Actually, Ian, is there anything that you would like to add? Do you want us to allow you to speak? No? Okay. So, I mean, basically, we put out Columbia and the Public Library, those things that we discussed, and
actually the public library has stuff like building by building. When you start to research it, there's a lot of individual buildings where they have archival photographs at least.
And it's a shame that Matthew did not stay with us, because when Matthew Spady was working on his book in this Audubon area, he no doubt had to tap in to a number of sources, to get information on buildings. But I do know that Avery Library is a great resource, but you have to be able to get into Avery Library.
But they've digitized a lot too. You should go look on their site. They're rapidly digitizing resources.
Okay, but the question, are they digitizing it and making it publicly available, or do you have?
Yeah, yeah. Columbia Digital Libraries has a lot now, and some of it is from Avery, and
Bravo.
anybody can get on there.
Bravo. So that, is there any new business?
Thank you.
Welcome. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? I see
I
Vivian.
second.
So it's 8:32. We are adjourned. And I would just ask regarding the 9:35 reso, anyone who has any edits, if you could send that like now, within the next hour or so, I will do my best to try to compile them all and recirculate a updated draft tomorrow noonish. Okay.
Wait, how do you want to handle the minutes this month? Should I just circulate it to the larger group rather than?
Might as well. And,
Okay. Great.
Okay, take care all. Good night.
Have a good trip.
Thank
Okay,
you.
and don't
Good night.
forget to go to Marielle's committee meeting tomorrow.